In the early 16th century, the quest for a westward route to the lucrative Spice Islands drove many European explorers. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese nobleman disillusioned with his homeland's rejection of his ambitious ideas, sought the patronage of Spain's King Charles I first. Magellan proposed a daring expedition to reach the Spice Islands by sailing westward, thereby bypassing the Portuguese-controlled route around Africa. On August 10, 1519, Magellan's carefully assembled fleet, known as the Armada de Molucca, departed from Seville. The fleet consisted of 5 ships: Trinidad, the flagship, San Antonio, Concepcion Victoria, and Santiago, manned by a diverse crew of about 270 men, including sailors, soldiers, and slaves. The expedition set out on a journey that would forever change the course of history. On September 20, 1519, the fleet left the harbor of Sanlúcar de Barrameda at the mouth of the Guadalquivir River, officially beginning their expedition. With high hopes and the promise of untold riches, the ships sailed into the unknown. On November 29, 1519, after a relatively smooth passage across the Atlantic Ocean, the fleet made its first landfall at Cape Verde, an archipelago off the west coast of Africa controlled by Portugal. Here they briefly resupplied, but kept a low profile to avoid attracting the attention of Portuguese authorities, who might view their expedition as an infringement on Portuguese maritime rights. By December 13, 1519, the fleet reached the coast of South America, specifically Rio de Janeiro, in present-day Brazil. This was a Portuguese territory, and although the Spanish were technically encroaching on Portuguese claims, they were not openly challenged. The crew took advantage of the natural bounty, collecting fresh water and food, and trading with the friendly local indigenous people. Magellan was cautious, knowing that any conflict with the Portuguese could jeopardize the mission. On January 10, 1520, continuing down the coast of South America, the fleet reached the estuary of the Rio de la Plata, modern-day Argentina and Uruguay, a vast river system that the crew initially mistook for a passage to the Pacific Ocean. They explored the area, but quickly realized it was not the strait they were seeking. By March 31, 1520, the fleet anchored in Puerto San Julian, a natural harbor along the coast of Patagonia, present-day Argentina. Here, Magellan decided to spend the winter months, as the harsh weather conditions made further sailing impossible. The isolation and harsh conditions of Puerto San Julian took a toll on the morale of the crew. Many began to doubt Magellan's leadership, resenting his strict discipline and the uncertainty of their journey. The situation culminated in a mutiny, led by 3 of the 5 ship captains: Gaspar de Quesada of the Concepcion, Juan de Cartagena of the San Antonio, and Luis de Mendoza of the Victoria. On April 1, 1520, the mutiny broke out, with the rebel captains attempting to seize control of the fleet. However, Magellan acted swiftly and decisively. His loyal crew, alongside his unwavering leadership, ensured that the rebellion was crushed within 24 hours. Magellan ordered the execution of Quesada, the marooning of Cartagena and a priest who supported the mutineers, and had Mendoza killed during the mutiny. This brutal suppression of dissent solidified Magellan's authority, but also deepened the resentment and fear among the surviving crew. On May 3, 1520, the fleet resumed its journey southward after the wintering period, continuing to search for the elusive strait that would lead them to the Pacific Ocean. On May 22, 1520, while exploring the coast, the ship Santiago was sent ahead to scout the coast. Unfortunately, the Santiago was wrecked during a storm while exploring the Santa Cruz River. The crew survived and made the arduous journey back to Puerto San Julian by foot, where they were rescued by the rest of the fleet. The loss of Santiago further depleted the already strained fleet. By October 21, 1520, after months of navigating the rugged coastline, the fleet finally discovered the entrance to a strait at the southern tip of South America. This strait, later named the Strait of Magellan, proved to be a complex and dangerous passage with numerous dead ends, strong currents, and unpredictable weather. The fleet cautiously entered the strait, spending more than a month navigating its winding channels. During this time, the crew sighted indigenous Patagonian tribes, whom they called Patagones, meaning big feet. Relations with the Patagones were limited but peaceful. On November 1, 1520, the ship San Antonio, commanded by the surviving mutineer Juan de Cartagena's ally, deserted the fleet and returned to Spain, taking with it most of the fleet's supplies. The San Antonio's crew, disillusioned by the hardships and fearing for their lives, chose to abandon the expedition. This desertion left Magellan with only 3 ships to continue the journey. After 38 days of navigating the treacherous strait, the fleet finally emerged into the vast and previously unknown ocean on the other side. Magellan named it the Pacific Ocean due to its calm and peaceful appearance compared to the Atlantic. Unbeknownst to the crew, they were now facing the most arduous part of their journey. From December 1520, March 1521, the fleet embarked on a grueling journey across the Pacific Ocean, a voyage that would last nearly 4 months. This leg of the journey was marked by extreme deprivation. The crew suffered from a severe shortage of food and fresh water, leading to malnutrition and scurvy. Rats became a prized food source, and many men died from disease and starvation. The vast expanse of the Pacific offered little respite, with no significant land masses encountered for weeks on end. The crew began to lose hope, unsure if they would ever see land again. Magellan's leadership was crucial during this period, as he maintained order and pushed the crew to continue despite the dire circumstances. On March 6, 1521, after 98 days of continuous sailing across the Pacific, the fleet finally sighted land. They reached the Mariana Islands, specifically Guam. The island provided a much-needed opportunity to resupply and rest. However, relations with the local Chamorro people quickly soured after a misunderstanding where the locals took goods from the ships. In retaliation, Magellan ordered the burning of several villages, and a skirmish ensued, resulting in casualties on both sides. Despite the brief conflict, the fleet was able to take on fresh supplies before continuing their journey westward. On March 16, 1521, the fleet made landfall on Homonhon Island in the Philippines, a lush and welcoming environment that provided a stark contrast to the barren expanses of the Pacific. Here the crew encountered the local people and began to establish relations. Magellan's fleet sailed to the nearby island of Limasawa, where they met Raja Colombo, a local chieftain. Colombo was hospitable, and through an interpreter, Magellan learned about the various islands and the political landscape of the region. Colombo introduced Magellan to Raja Humabon, the ruler of Cebu, a major trading center in the region. By April 7, 1521, the fleet arrived at Cebu, where Magellan forged a strong alliance with Raja Humabon. In exchange for military support against Humabon's rivals, Magellan was allowed to establish a Christian mission. Raja Humabon, his queen, and hundreds of his subjects were baptized, marking the first large-scale conversion to Christianity in the Philippines. Magellan's religious zeal was evident, as he sought to spread Christianity alongside his quest for spices. However, not all local chieftains were as receptive to the new faith or to Magellan's presence. On April 27, 1521, Magellan, eager to demonstrate his power and secure further loyalty from Raja Humabon, decided to assist in a local conflict. He agreed to help Humabon's rival, Datu Zula, subdue Lapu-Lapu, a chieftain of Mactan Island who refused to submit to Humabon or convert to Christianity. Underestimating the strength and determination of Lapu-Lapu's forces, Magellan landed on Mactan with a small contingent of around 60 men, including several indigenous allies. However, the shallow waters prevented the larger Spanish ships from providing artillery support, forcing Magellan and his men to wade through water to reach the shore. The battle quickly turned against Magellan. The indigenous warriors, armed with spears and swords, outnumbered the Spaniards and used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Magellan was struck by a poisoned arrow and overwhelmed by the enemy. He fought valiantly, but was ultimately killed in the battle, his body left behind as his surviving men retreated to their ships. Magellan's death marked a turning point in the expedition, throwing the crew into disarray and shaking the fragile alliances he had forged. After Magellan's death, the remaining crew elected Duarte Barbosa and João Serrao as their leaders. However, the situation in Cebu quickly deteriorated. Raja Humabon, who had initially been an ally, turned against the Spaniards, possibly fearing their growing influence or in retaliation for Magellan's actions. During a banquet hosted by Humabon, Barbosa, Serrao, and several other officers were ambushed and killed, leaving the expedition without effective leadership. The remaining crew, now in a desperate situation, decided to leave Cebu immediately. The fleet, now reduced to 2 ships, Trinidad and Victoria, set sail for the Moluccas, Spice Islands. Conception was scuttled due to a lack of men to crew all 3 remaining ships. The crew was reduced to less than half of its original size, and they were now focused solely on reaching the Spice Islands and returning to Spain. On November 8, 1521, the fleet arrived at the Moluccas, specifically Tidore Island, where they were warmly received by the local sultan. The Spaniards traded for cloves and other valuable spices, loading their ships with as much as they could carry. With their ships laden with spices, the two remaining ships attempted to sail back to Spain. Victoria, under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano, took the westward route, while Trinidad attempted to return via the eastward route across the Pacific. By May 1522, the Trinidad was captured by the Portuguese in the Moluccas. The crew was imprisoned, and most of them never made it back to Spain. This left the Victoria as the sole surviving ship of the original fleet. The Victoria, now severely undermanned, rounded the Cape of Good Hope. This leg of the journey was treacherous, as the Portuguese were patrolling the waters, and the ship had to avoid capture. On September 6, 1922, after nearly 3 years at sea, the Victoria finally returned to Sanlúcar de Barrameda, Spain. Of the original 270 crew members who set out, only 18 survived to complete the circumnavigation. The ship carried a valuable cargo of spices that more than compensated for the financial losses of the expedition. The surviving crew members were received as heroes in Seville. Juan Sebastian Elcano, who had taken command after Magellan's death, was hailed for successfully completing the first circumnavigation of the Earth. The expedition, though fraught with hardship, death, and conflict, achieved what no one had done before. It proved that the world was round and much larger than previously thought. It also demonstrated the vastness of the Pacific Ocean and opened new routes for trade, setting the stage for the global age of exploration that followed. Magellan's name became synonymous with daring exploration, though he did not live to see the completion of his grand vision. His voyage reshaped global trade routes, leading to increased European involvement in Southeast Asia, the colonization of the Philippines by Spain, and a new understanding of the world's geography. The expedition marked the beginning of European dominance in global trade and laid the foundations for the modern, interconnected world. Despite the loss of 4 ships and most of the crew, the return of the Victoria to Spain marked a triumph of human endurance, navigation, and ambition, forever etching Magellan's expedition into the annals of history. Like and subscribe for more in-depth stories.